Rex, you have a couple questions, or at least one question from the audience. Do you want
Yes.
to take those now?
Yes.
Okay, there's two questions from the audience, woman here and the gentleman here. Let's go with the woman here first, and then, excuse me.
This was like, I was on the Child Support Guidelines Task Force when I was.
Speak up, speak up.
I was on that.
Yeah, we won't hear the question unless you're speaking to a microphone.
Here.
There you go, yeah, there's one too.
I yell, but you go.
I was on the Child Support Guidelines Task Force when the income shares model was developed for Minnesota. So I worked with the USDA data when we developed the original model. And so I just wanted to make sure that he's making it clear that the USDA data is imputed in itself, the chart, the actual chart. So the data was collected in Consumer Price Index Urban Consumers. For the previous 6 reports, used this database from 2005 to 2006.
We go to stop. 6 consecutive reports use the same basic data, and they just upped it in terms of CPI, right?
Right, so that's the issue, is the way that they calculate the CPI, it's not actual data, it's an imputed, so that's why you're getting these different figures. And then it's imputed a lot for children of 2 and 3 households. So that's where you're getting these high figures, because it's not actual data, it's imputed data. So I'm hoping you're understanding what he's trying to say about, I don't know if he needs to give you more information of how it's imputed, but this is not actual data that the USDA is using, it's imputed. And then he's had that in his charts.
You're saying that the USDA doesn't use actual data for any of the categories? I don't think that's what you're
Well,
saying.
this is the
Imputed from 2005.
2015 report. Please read, where is it that you read?
The lower-
Oh, yes, this one, right here. Read it out loud, Jeff.
Oh, you're serious?
Nice job. First grade.
Okay. This report presents the latest information on USDA's Family Expenditures on Children series using the Consumer Expenditure Survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Beginning with this report, it is the intention of the series to use the 5 most current years of Consumer Expenditure Survey adjusted for inflation using the Consumer Price Index, all urban consumers. The previous 6 reports used base data from 2005-2006 and were updated with a CPIU through 2013.
Stop. Read that sentence again. The previous 5 reports.
Previous 6 reports.
Pardon me. Read that sentence again, please.
Yes, sir. The previous 6 reports used base data from 2005-2006 and were updated with the CPI through 2013.
So they had 6 reports, but they all use the same bloody data.
The
Right?
prior reports, correct?
Yeah,
But it's the imputed number, they're imputing way too high.
yeah.
Jimmy, then Lisa.
Just really quickly, I think for myself, as I'm working through some of these definitions, I'm making sure I understand imputed data is just data that's been assigned a value. There's nothing
Well,
kind
it's
of.
imputed in the sense that it follows a model. You know, like the extra bedroom. That's an imputed cost, but not an actual cost because they don't spend it. They don't actually buy the second bedroom, right?
Just let me even strip it down further. Do you give me a definition of what imputed
Sure.
is?
Let's take the bedroom case. Suppose the family does not have an additional bedroom, just says, I don't need the den anyway, right? So they spend a little bit more to reconfigure the den into the bedroom, right? But that's not, the little bit more is not what the USDA measures. They measure the additional hypothetical cost of the third bedroom. And they impute that to the child. That's not a real cost, that's an imputed cost.
Okay, Lisa?
Wait a minute, Jimmy, do you understand? That's really important.
Yeah, that what I'm hearing is that in order to kind of bring that original value back, they extrapolate it out to a third bedroom
Yes.
and give that
Yes.
second bedroom to the child, and then you get the den back, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the the way they impute it to the, and there's 2 children and 3 children, you need to explain how they impute. from
More
2 to 3.
bedrooms, more bedrooms.
Gotcha. Okay.
Lisa?
Just to clarify though, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what Jeff was reading, I get the part of the distinction between imputation and not imputing using actual. But wasn't the point by the question and by pointing this out is with the actual data?
Even that's wrong.
But what it was saying was that the actual data was increased by the consumer price index
But
to
not-
get to 2009.
Yeah.
But that their most current report is not doing that. They were referencing their prior report.
That's correct. They have a new survey.
Okay, and also, did you say that you also used incremental on
Yes.
the consumer price index? So you did the same thing to get to the 2009,
Yeah, well,
right?
what I did is use their numbers, and if they reported the same, based on the same numbers, then I did as well. That's all, right.
Okay, so we really can't.
No, here's the difference. They used just 05, 06 data. We bought 4 different discs from the Census Bureau. And so we used the different surveys. For some reason, they didn't do it. I don't know why.
And just to, I'm sorry, but just to be clear on kind of comparing apples to apples, as far as the data, I get the imputed stuff. But as far as the data, if they're saying now in their most recent years, and I think we talked about that, do you have an updated that would compare with what they have for their current data for more current years?
No.
Okay.
It took us enormous amounts of time to do what we did. That's why the data is 2006 to 2009. We finally published the paper in 2015. It's not an easy process, especially when you don't have a big staff.
Okay.
So I didn't do that. And
Okay.
I wish I did, but I only did what I did.
Right. No, I wanted to get the years straight in my head. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kathleen, did you have, and then Jeff?
And I'm just clarifying, what I heard you say is that when you were dealing with your data, you also applied the consumer price index. Was it the same index as USDA used?
They said they only used urban households, and I don't recall whether we used all or urban, but it's not that different. But I don't recall. That's the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
I was just going to point out that this expenditures on children by families 2015, the USDA report, it is from January 2017. And I think maybe what we could do is provide a link to it on our Taskforce page, because I did read a little bit more. I mean, cherry picking 3 sentences out of a 30-page report is probably not the best approach. That there's a whole section on the data, and I think the point is we should understand the data that the USDA uses, so when we're comparing, we understand, where was the data from, how was it used, was it averaged, was it not, the things that were just pointed out. But there's a pretty lengthy section on the data here, and they surveyed families quarterly, and so we should probably all, unfortunately, read this 30-page report if we really want to understand USDA.
Agreed.
Jason, did you have a question? Okay, Pamela?
Just a statement. What I would also like to see posted is a link for us to get to the Census Bureau, because that's the data that we're all referencing. Because I want to understand very clearly, what do they have in their categories? What do they define as transportation, as childcare? I really want those definitions to be very clear to all of us.
I think that's a really good idea.
I'm making note of that.
Thank you.
There was one other comment or question from the audience, and then we'll let you get back to your presentation.
Sure.
Should I come up or can I?
Just do it from there.
So, I actually thought of two parts to it, but they both relate to the modeling. As I understand it, in those tables that we looked at before the break, the left-hand columns, the ones that were the lowest values, were closest to representing the actual costs.
Monetary costs.
The actual monetary expenditures of parents for their children, however many children there were. I guess, to me, it seems like the word that would best sum that up is frugality. that people find ways, as opposed to that opportunity cost. People don't just say, oh, I have a child, I need a new room for that child. that they make do. They find ways to save and to economize. And often, for instance, with the 2 or the 3 children, children may be wearing clothes that were worn by their older sibling before them. That there are ways to economize and to reduce costs. But my concern is, and maybe because it sounds like you're only trying to model the actual costs or the actual expenditures, so this may be out of bounds, and I'll leave it to you to say. I'm concerned, it seems good on the one hand to pay attention to what parents actually spend, but on the other hand, not to only look at that low end of expenditure, but to also think about the situations where there are parents with more income to provide more, because money often does provide opportunities, and is there a way to model that beyond what parents actually spend?
Go back.
That was one piece of the question.
Yes, let me answer, let me get the data. Go to the rich,
Oh, I'm sorry.
high income families.
Right.
High income families. There. Now, these are families with an average of income of 160,000. All right, and so these are the data on how much incrementally they spend on their children, and you can see the numbers. Right? They are what they are, and they're not zero, but they're not they are what they are. I don't know what else to say. This is the U.S., this is the data that we get from high-income married households. You can see with 3 children they spend on the average of $7,000 on child care and education. But not 10,000, the USDA, not 10,000.
Right.
Right? And the housing is much less because they would probably have the same house with or without children. Right? Maybe they have a big house. And now they still have the big house, but they use it more for bedrooms. Right?
Or more people in a room on the low end.
Oh, no, that's
Consider
right.
that as
That's
well,
right.
yes.
That's right.
The other part of my question, and you mentioned it very briefly at the beginning, and maybe you'll be coming back to it, has to do with the value, whether you choose to view it as a cost or a value, I think both, of the parenting. And it could be either parent, but there are certainly opportunity costs in terms of possibly not being able to work or have income, or lesser income from different kind of work, or certainly is unfortunately still the case, women generally paid less on average than men for the same work. So there are clearly costs there, but how do we model that as well, and the value of the parenting that's done?
This, I don't know. I mean, it's important that I tell you what I think I know, and it's important that things I don't know. I don't know how to model the opportunity costs of parenting time as opposed to something else. Because different people have such different views. Right? But we talked about that. I don't want to go over it again. Right? The answer is I don't know. Let's go on. All right.
Next slide.
Next slide. Next one. Let's go here. Well, nothing on this slide is something I haven't said. The USDA estimates really rest on arbitrary presumptions on how expenditures are made. And they do that with the legitimate purpose of trying to impute the full opportunity costs. Let's go to the next one. All right, I want to go beyond the USDA to talk about income equivalence models. Now I know that's not the basis of child support awards in Minnesota, but it is the model which is used mainly in other states. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, but I won't spend too much time. All right? Right. The income equivalence models, which most states use, have 2 varieties, and you can see what they say. Engel's models are defined a certain way, and Rothbard models are a different way. Let's apply the income equivalence approach to my den nursery example, because it keeps it manageable. Both forms estimate the dollar amount that should be compensated to the household to compensate the adults for their loss of the den. But note, and here's a critical factor, the budget constraint of the household is not considered. So these compensation amounts may exceed the budget of the household. But these are not considered. They don't, when you do this modeling, you ignore the budget constraint. And that's one of the major defects of it. Let's go to the next slide. Let me go to that California report, which I mentioned before. And please read the first quote on there. And you can see it's a reference to the California report. Had the parents been childless, they would have been better off because they wouldn't have to share their collective goods, food, housing, transportation with their kids. You're better off when you don't share with your kids. That's the essence of this method. The essence of this method is that you're worse off when you share your common goods with your kids, and you're better off without them. That's the essence of this method. Let me tell you a story, right? My own personal story. Try not to break up. When my kid moved out a year and a half ago, he was 24, he was out of college, he had a good job, he could support himself. It was right that he moved out. He wanted to move out. I supported him to do it. It was really the right thing for him. It was awful for me. All right, let me go on. It was awful. That conflicts with that assumption. The assumption is I'm better off when my kid moved out. Huh?
Dr. Kundra, I don't need to diminish at all the result of children leaving and letting go and all of that. But I interpret this differently. I think all it's saying is that if people are childless, they don't have the pressure of sharing the common goods.
They don't share the common good.
Because they don't have anyone with whom to share it.
That's
So-
right, but they're better off when they don't share. That's what the essence of the income equivalence method is, that the family, the household, the parents, the adults, are better off when they don't share.
Don't you think it's more that dinks, dual income, no kids, are better off than dual income, one child? That's how I interpret that.
No, but it's not better off, it's the sharing. It's the sharing, and there's no benefit given in this method to that substance. They need to be compensated. I need to be compensated because my kid moved out. That's what's implied in this. And it breaks me up, as you can tell.
To me, we're back to the stuff that's the opportunity cost.
Yes.
And you think it is. I don't see it that way.
Right.
I think that my parents found it fascinating that when their 26-year-old moved out after moving back home for a couple of years, and that person had a very demanding job, was hardly ever home,
Yeah.
was astounded at how much their utility bills went down every month with that one less person in the house.
I'm sure that's
So
right. I'm sure
if we're
that's
going to
right.
look at, your whole premise up to now has been, there's all these other aspects of parenting that we can't quantify, they're not monetary, and we can't look at them. This is asking to look at some very monetary
right.
consequences, and you're now conflating it with the opportunity cost that you're unhappy about.
Julie, you're right. You're absolutely right. I stand corrected because it affects me so much.
Right, and I understand that, but a lot of the opportunity costs we're talking about for parents and setting child support are important to them too.
Yes.
And we're saying we're not going to look at those, that's fine, because we're an economist and we're going to look at the actual numbers.
The actual numbers are fine, but this method, it requires child support to be based on or increased when the parents are compensated when they don't have to share their community property with their child, their joint properties with their child. And after all, it's not just childless people, it's people who the children have moved out. You know, I mean, they're part of it. And maybe I should go on. This is probably not a good topic for me. All right, let's go on to the next one. The second critical premise is that the required compensation depends on adult clothing. The Rothbard method says that the only way we can equate welfare in a family is when they spend the same amount on adult clothing. Right? Even though adult clothing is generally less than 5% of household spending. So we're using as our index of welfare a very relatively minor level item in the household budget. And the California report acknowledged that this is questionable as a measure of household standards. But probably the most important assumption, which is based on pure economics, is the fact that we assume that the preferences of the adults are the same with or without children. And we all know that our lives change when children come into it. We all know that. And our preferences change. We all know that. Anybody who's had kids knows that. Right? And that's not permitted in the income equivalence methods. Income equivalence methods logically require that preferences don't change in the presence of children than they were without children. And there's an enormous economic literature that says that assumption is simply wrong. Simply wrong. And I can give you, in my paper, we have a lot of references to that economic literature. I'm not going to repeat that for you here. It'd probably send you to sleep. But we all know that preferences change in the presence of children, and that's not permitted by income equivalence methods. Let's go on to the next one. All right, so let's look at the numbers. You can see the one thing about income equivalence methods is that they are not item specific. They're not category specific. They are only done with overall, because that's the way they're computed. Because their whole focus is on how much do we have to provide a household to increase the level of adult clothing to what it was in the absence of children. The issue is, how much income do we have to give a household in the presence of children to make them spend as much money as they spent without children? Without children. It's true that when children arrive, most households spend less money on adult clothing. But how much less? And it says that we have to spend enough to equalize the amount of adult clothing, and that amount of income equals the cost of raising children. The cost of raising children is defined in the Rothbard method as the amount of compensation that must be given to the adults in the household to have them spend as much money on adult clothing as they spent without children. what it is. And you can see the numbers. Once again, we get imputed costs, which are equal, or for most cases, equal or exceeding incremental costs. So that's not true in high-income households. There's a real difference between by income levels. But the imputed costs are really, again, very high. The Roth-Barth method is another way of deriving imputed costs, which once again exceed real expenditures.
Lisa.
Just quickly, this is Lisa Coons. I have a question on the incremental cost column.
Sure.
So that, can you tell me like the 3,421, what is that number?
The 3,421 is the additional total expenditures in the 5 or 6 categories we had before, in the presence of children that were not made without children.
Okay, so it includes all categories, not just this adult clothing?
Oh, no.
Okay.
It doesn't include adult clothing at all.
Okay, so in the Rothbard then column in the imputed costs, do they extrapolate that out somehow to get to all categories? Or, I mean, I don't get how we get from just comparing the adult clothing piece and these numbers, and maybe I missed something, I'm sorry.
Okay. Go back to the imputed costs
Sorry.
for the low income. Yeah. Okay. Now that's, you see the 3,419, that's
Right,
the
I see
3,420,
that.
right? That's where the incremental costs come from, and you
Okay.
remember that. It's the additional cost for these categories.
Okay,
Now, let's go back to what table I had in front of me. Right there. So that's that first number.
okay,
Somehow, the other one was 3,419, this is 3,421, but it's the
Okay.
same number. Okay. Now, it's rounding error somehow like that. Now, Rothbard doesn't do it this way. They don't look at category by category expenditures. They don't look at expenditures at all, except adult clothing. They don't look at any good which children are involved in. They only look at adult clothing, which in principle has nothing to do with children. And they ask, how much did adult clothing decline when children arrived? And you can determine that by differences in number of children. And then they ask, how much money do I have to give this household to bring their adult clothing expenditures up to what it was originally, or originally without children?
and so the 3,083 on that first line is how much they have to give this household to get the expenditures up?
No, it's the $6,000 number.
It's the $6,000 to get it up
To
there.
get the adult clothing up, and then I subtracted 6,000 from 3,000 to get the third column, to get in some sense, the imputed costs. But there's no issue about the 3,421.
Okay,
That's
Thank
does that make sense?
yeah, I wasn't catching that in relation to this, looking at a very, I think probably low expense of the adult clothing and how they extrapolated out to get to the 6,504. That's the piece I was missing.
It's a very complicated method, not one that I would ever use.
Okay.
Rachel, you have a comment?
Kathleen.
Oh, Kathleen, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Rachel,
Oh, we're switched around
It
here.
was a very nice compliment to me.
Rachel may be mad at you though. So when you're looking at the Engel, Rothbard, and the USDA cost, which of those 3 systems do you think is most accurate?
you know what I'm going to say. The incremental costs.
No, I didn't list that as a choice.
What did you
I said Engel, Rothbard, and USDA. You can think about your answer if you'd like.
No, I'll contemplate. I don't think either of them are. They're different approaches. First of all, I don't think there's much difference in Engels and Rothbard. The principle is the same, you get different numbers. But if you go back to read Engels, believe it or not I did, he wrote in the middle of the 19th century, and it was about the fact that richer families spend less on food. That's Engels. And that was a couple hundred years ago. I don't think that's relevant today.
But here's the issue that we have to grapple with. We have to select a model. We don't have the capability necessarily to recreate a model. So we have yours, which you've identified, and then we have 3 others.